Welcome everyone to the 12th episode of Ability Academy. Today we'll be taking a look at the Wind Power, Electromorphosis, Cloud 9, Levitate, Wonder Guard, Clear Body, White Smoke, Full Metal Body, Lightning Rod, and Serene Grace abilities. The Wind Power ability serves as the signature ability of the Watcho family and exists as a consequence of the unique biology at play with their forms. These creatures have the power to use their bones and specialized air sacs in their bodies to generate and hold electricity in their forms, and this gives them unique capacity to directly convert wind energy into electrical energy internally. This not only serves as a free energy source for them when flying over vast distances in the wild, but also helps them more readily charge up power to make the best use they can of their electrical powers. While this might not always be of much use against terrestrial creatures, it's a huge boon when in flight, as it can help them deter most predatory bird Pokémon that might otherwise try and dine on them. While this ability does not normally have a significant impact on these creatures in battle, if a Pokémon in possession of this ability is hit with a wind-based move, they will still take the full effects of the move, but it will also provide them a burst of power that can elevate their internal electrical energy levels, granting a boost in power if they use an electric type attack next. The Wind Power ability is a bit of a niche ability that can give those that have access to it a notable boost in power if they choose to use an electric type attack next, and thus can be an effective way to give a boost in power to any electrical attacks at a Pokemon's disposal. The Electromorphosis ability is the signature ability of Bellyboat and helps to give them and the higher stamina a bit of an edge in any fight. Because these creatures utilize the kinetic energy of expanding and contracting their bodies to generate electricity, any extra motion that's put into the frames can thus result in the generation of even more energy than normal. In the case of specimens with this ability, they can then harness the extra energy to power up their electrical attacks the next time they are used. This essentially makes the ability similar in attributes to a free charge technique, though without the boost the special defense the technique would also provide. Even so, it can prove to be quite useful for these creatures if they need a quick boost to take out an aggressive foe. Due to the way that the bodies of these creatures convert kinetic energy into electrical energy, if a Pokémon in possession of this ability takes a hit from an attack, it will transfer the extra stored energy into their offensive abilities, resulting in the next electric type attack dealing more damage than it normally would. The Electromorphosis ability is a useful ability for giving those that possess it an extra charge to their electric type attacks, and thus help to make the most of them when getting repeatedly attacked by an opponent and unable to avoid their attacks. The Cloud 9 ability is a unique and relatively misunderstood ability that essentially renders even the harshest of weather conditions neutral and in turn negates their effects. The Cloud 9 ability is generally only possessed by the members of the Psyduck family due to their abnormal psychokinetic powers, but other Pokémon can also have access to the ability and possessing unique powers that they can use to alter the atmosphere around their immediate vicinity. Regardless of the possessor, the ability is effectively the same, as the moment that the possessor arrives on the battlefield, they automatically release a potent blast of low-grade psychokinetic energy that alters the air temperature around them within a surprisingly large space, and nullifies the effects of air currents around and above them, in turn calming the environment and rendering it still and peaceful, a state that serves to give this ability its unique name. As soon as the Pokémon in possession of this ability enters into battle, the effects of the ability essentially form as a sort of dispersal field that stops all motion in the air and sets everything into a calm and neutral state, in turn nullifying any present weather conditions and ensuring that nothing can be done to change the weather. The Cloud 9 ability really doesn't have a great deal to offer in terms of strategies or even defensive purposes, but at the very least, it can act as an effective anti-weather tool and ensure that the opposition cannot really rely on weather conditions to help them out in battle. The only disadvantage this ability brings is the fact that no trainer can use the weather to their advantage, including the possessor's trainer. The Levitate ability is among the most widely dispersed and adaptable abilities known as a result of its simple requirements and easy execution. While many creatures that are not flying types by nature have the capacity to at least float or fly above the ground, in the heat of battle, these entities would still normally be vulnerable to the effects of seismic waves when close enough to the ground to detect them, as in the case of Pokémon like Beedrill. However, for a lot of these Pokémon, they are still able to avoid even this sort of damage as a result of their capacity to levitate off the ground, either through gases, wings, or some other physical or chemical feature, and are thus classified with this ability to make sense of it in practice. The reasons for this type of extended mobility vary greatly between those that can possess the ability, leaving its overall combat effects as its only universally shared trait. Given that it involves Pokémon that are able to levitate off the ground to noble heights in battle, the Levitate ability itself is thus defined among Pokémon as the capacity to fly or otherwise float off the ground far enough to become immune to the effects of ground-type moves, with the exceptions of a few outliers like the Sand Attack technique and the Thousand Arrows attack. It is duly noted the possessors of this ability are also immune to the effects of terrain-based techniques, as well as the Sky Drop attack and the Arena Trap ability in battle, thus giving them an edge that many flying-type Pokemon possess naturally, without having to carry the potential negative consequences of actually being a flying-type Pokemon. The Levitate ability is a devastating ability in most cases that can give many Pokemon the opportunity to gain the same secondary benefits owned by natural flying types while retaining none of the type's actual weaknesses. The chances of seeing Pokemon in battle with this ability are higher than many other abilities, so ground-type specialists everywhere will have to find a different method of offense if they even want a chance of dealing significant amounts of damage in battle against a Pokemon in possession of this ability. However, while the Levitate ability itself is not detrimental in any real way, it is nonetheless flawed in that an Iron Ball will essentially deactivate the ability, and an Ingrain, Gravity, Smackdown, or Thousand Arrows move will disable it for the duration of a battle. The Wonder Guard ability is a strikingly bizarre signature ability of Shedinja, and serves the perfect testament to their otherwise mysterious existence. Unlike most ghost types, Shedinja themselves are not actually alive in any sense of the word, but are merely created when a lost spirit chooses to occupy the shed shell of an Ankata after they evolve. While the shell itself is so brittle that it only gives Shedinja 1 HP for as long as they are in existence, the fact that the occupying spirit is not fully connected to the shell on a spiritual basis means that it can freely channel its natural energies into the shell construct, creating a powerful energy barrier in the process. The barrier itself is formed from concentrated spiritual energy that forms a defensive bubble of sorts around Shedinja that can repel damage from many different types of attacks and techniques, and while it doesn't make them completely immune to harm, for the most part, it serves them well and keeps them from being easily taken out by most forms of direct offense thrown at them, all to keep the shell the spirit occupies safe from direct damage. The magnificent barrier provided by the Wonder Guard ability is perhaps among the strongest natural barriers known to exist, and can effectively protect Shedinja from being damaged by attacks that are not super effective against their type, in turn making them vulnerable to damage only from fire, flying, rock, ghost, and dark type attacks. Despite the incredible versatility of this defensive shield, the fact that the shell only has 1 HP means that any move that bypasses the barrier will instantly knock out Shedinja. Moreover, the ability does not prevent the affliction of damaging status conditions, nor does it protect against abrasive weather conditions or moves that create entry hazards. It is lastly noted that the ability can never be removed or swapped from Shedinja, but a trace ability will still be able to copy its attributes. The Wonder Guard ability is essentially the only reason why Shedinja are able to survive most battles, and can prove to be an insurmountable force in the right situations. While it may only be good at negating direct damage from 13 of the 18 known types, this immense immunity is greater than that possessed by any other species, and can often make these otherwise weak creatures extremely difficult to defeat in battle. While the ability itself has no real disadvantages, the fact that anything that bypasses its effects will instantly knock Shedinja out means that it must be used carefully, even if a super effective strike or indirect form of damage is unlikely to come from a particular opponent. The Clear Body ability is a rare ability generally limited to creatures that are either at least partially mechanical or possess bodies that can adjust themselves at a cellular level in order to restore themselves to their current statistical status in battle. Pokemon in possession of this ability generally do not exist in a perfectly organic state, and are at least considered to be mechanical or completely artificial, and thus do not respond in the same manner as organic creatures to moves that might try to negatively alter their stats. The only exception to this rule is the Tentacool family, which only has access to this ability as a result of their capacity to reformat the cellular structure as needed on a microscopic level. Regardless, this means that these entities do not register or otherwise ignore negative changes to their forms that may come as a result of moves trying to alter them in some way from an opponent, simply shrugging them off as if they were nothing or adjusting their forms to compensate and negate their effects. In short, because of the composition of their bodies and the way in which they can counter the effects of certain types of moves, Pokemon in possession of this ability do not process stat-lowering moves from other Pokemon in the same fashion, and are mechanically and biologically incapable of understanding the effects these moves are meant to have, making them immune to any negative stat changes the opponent attempts to inflict on them. The Clear Body ability might not be the easiest to understand, but its effects are more than appreciated, as they make the possessor completely immune to any negative stat changes that may be a part of an opponent's strategy, and easily shuts down any attempts they make at softening their target up for an easy knockout. The white smoke ability is a rare ability, seen only among Torkoal and the members of the Sizzlipede family in most cases, as a result of their use of organic fuel for power. Though Heatmor are also occasionally seen with this ability as well, limiting it to fire-type Pokémon exclusively. Pokémon in possession of this ability naturally produce or can produce a thick white smoke by generating a slow, smoldering fire in their bodies that relies on a fuel other than gas to initiate combustion. The biological reasons for committing to this act, when it isn't always the most efficient way for them to burn fuel to make energy, vary between species, but it is generally used as a defense mechanism, as the thick smoke obscures them from sight almost entirely at its worst, making it easier for them to get the drop on an opponent or otherwise escape from an unfavorable position, something that Pokemon like Torkoal in particular need greatly because of limited movement speeds. The thick white smoke that is created as a result of this ability being active has the effect of obscuring the possessor's sight, but not enough to actually decrease the capacity to track a target. It is, however, enough to ensure that any move made by the opponent to change the stats of the possessor is rendered ineffective due to the possessor being unable to see and interpret it clearly. Moreover, this smoke acts in a similar way when out in the field, so as long as the possessor is at the front of a party, otherwise outside of his capture device, the chances of encountering wild Pokemon in confined spaces are decreased by 50%. The white smoke ability, despite being fairly limited, is a great tool to use against stat-focused tacticians and can easily eliminate any attempt they make to change the stats of the possessor. In addition, the smoke can serve to obscure the vision of the opposition, in turn making it much harder for the opponent to strike an otherwise slower Pokemon. Moreover, the fact that this ability makes it less likely to see a wild Pokemon can help out trainers that are trying to get through a densely packed area, such as a forest, without encountering too much resistance. However, the fact that this ability does make it harder for wild Pokemon to see the possessor can also make things difficult for trainers that are looking to battle or capture wild Pokemon, and can equally make the possessor difficult to see on the battlefield in some cases. The Full Metal Body ability is the signature ability of Solgaleo, and acts to help reflect any and all potential stat changes that may come their way from an opponent. The outer bodies of Solgaleo are covered in a durable but otherwise alien metal that acts as a conduit for light, absorbing and then radiating it from their bodies on a constant basis. This light mixes with the ultra wormhole energy they lay inside of their forms that they use to create portals in and out of ultra space, creating a powerful energetic barrier of sorts that coats their metallic bodies and essentially acts as a counter for negative stat changes that may be inflicted upon them by an opponent, using their stored energy reserves to counteract these changes and essentially nullify them, to keep unique and exotic creatures safe from such effects and no less capable of putting out their best in any sort of battle. In short, because the composition of their bodies and the way in which light and internal ultra wormhole energies mix and react together throughout their forms, Solgaleo are more heavily protected against stat-lowering moves than other Pokemon than what might be seen among other types of Pokemon, making them immune to any negative stat changes the opponent attempts to inflict on them. The Full Metal Body ability might not be the easiest to understand, but its effects are more than appreciated, as they make the possessor completely immune to any negative stat changes that may be part of an opponent's strategy, and easily shuts down any attempts they make at softening their target up for an easy knockout. The Lightning Rod ability is an interesting ability that is completely dependent upon the anatomy of the possessor and its capacity to attract electricity in battle. In effect, a Pokemon with the Lightning Rod ability possesses either a pointed instrument on their body that is susceptible to conducting electrical current, or otherwise possesses a body that naturally attracts electricity in great amounts without the need for internal movement. For most electric-type Pokemon that are in possession of this ability, this is a natural consequence of them developing bodies that attract and store energy from lightning or even power plants in order to keep the energy reserves in top shape. While for others, such as the members of the Rhyhorn family, this ability serves as a defense mechanism instead, using the natural ground-type properties to absorb electrical energy to nullify its effects entirely. Regardless though, the ability has the same general effects regardless of the reason for its existence among Pokemon. As long as it is active, this ability will cause all electric-type moves to be directed at the possessor of this ability in battle, granting the move a perfect accuracy rate in single battles and causing all electric-type moves to hit them in a multi-Pokemon battle. Because the ability is designed to enable the possessor to attract any and all electricity that is near them, the possessor of the ability effectively becomes immune to the damage or other effects the move would have on them or another target, and internally converts the absorbed electricity into power for its special offenses, in turn raising its special attack stat in the process. But only if the possessor is not naturally immune to electric-type moves. In that case, the possessor's immunity to electricity will kick in beforehand and prevent the special attack stat from being raised. The Lightning Rod ability is the perfect tool for shutting down electric-type specialists that enjoy attacking Pokemon with type disadvantages in multi-Pokemon battles, and can prove to be a useful defensive buffer when nearby allies are otherwise vulnerable to electric-type attacks. The fact that this ability will also raise the possessor's special attack stat as long as they are not ground-type in nature further makes it a powerful tool for hammering away at the opposition with powerful special attacks in battle. The Serene Grace ability is a potentially devastating ability that can make life difficult for opponents that are faced with attacks that not only deal damage, but may also have unwanted secondary effects. While would it be helpful to properly explain the biological origins of this ability, in truth, such origins are still a relative mystery, and thus is the true mechanism that allows this ability to function. In essence, however, Pokemon in possession of this ability are able to naturally harmonize their bodies and minds with the energy used in their attacks, regardless of whether it is mechanical or some other form, and can thus better utilize their moves in battle to amplify the secondary effects that come with some types of attacks. The fact that this ability is tied to Pokemon known for having mystical or otherwise mysterious powers to them does show that the ability likely exists for some reason, but how and why it does what it does is difficult to determine outside of what has been stated here, and likely will only be more well understood with more thorough examinations of the Pokemon that can possess it. The added harmonization with the energies that flow through their bodies, in the case of Pokemon in possession of this ability, does not truly increase the damage their attacks can do, but by harmonizing with this energy, the possessor is apparently capable of doubling the chances of secondary effects occurring whenever an attack with such a potential effect is executed successfully. The Serene Grace ability is a great tool for trainers of all types for its capacity to increase the chances of a secondary effect occurring with any given attack. It may not be potent enough for an entire strategy to always be built around it in most cases, but at the very least, it can make things much easier for a struggling Pokemon that needs to cripple a stronger opponent and potentially keep them safe from harm with status conditions that inflict immobilizing afflictions such as sleep and freeze. That's it for this episode, so stay tuned for the next episode of Ability Academy. Thank you all for watching this video. It always brings me great joy to see others enjoying the work I do to try and make the world of Pokemon and the fascinating creatures that lay inside of it feel as real as they possibly can. If you really enjoy my work, please feel free to leave a comment and subscribe, as I always do my best to respond to any and all comments that are left on my videos. In addition, if you wish to learn more about my work and help support it, you can find links to my Patreon page, as well as email and other contact information to my work on DeviantArt in the video description down below. Furthermore, you can find a link to my Discord server there as well if you'd like to get a first glimpse at what videos are coming up next and converse with other fans of the world of Pokemon. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, and have a wonderful rest of your day.